Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I'm Justine Gonzalez, your hostess for this episode. Let's dive right in. Very excited about this question today. It's a big one. How can I manage my anxiety in the workplace in a better way? And I want to first start by saying you are not alone. You are not alone. If you're feeling just the pressures, or you often feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, or perhaps it is when you see what seems to be an unsurmountable task and you don't know where to begin. I've had my own battles with anxiety over the years, and it's a topic near and dear to my heart. It's one I don't think we're talking about enough in the workplace, but I hope to offer some tools here to help better understand how we do that. Especially if you are a manager or leader in an organization and you're desperately trying to figure out, I still need to run my company. We still need to consider our bottom line, our impact, how we're creating. But we also have to consider the wellness of our people and how our workforce is feeling. And for some, that word feelings is kind of like, they're like, but I'm a logical person. Even if we use the term thoughts, a lot of times our thoughts are us just making meaning, just like us processing an emotion we might be feeling. These are the ways that we try to make meaning of a situation or a conversation or a communication exchange that maybe didn't go the way we wanted it to. We are often trying to create meaning. And so what do? I'll use some of the language that often you may hear if you studied Brene Brown's work over the years on worthiness and shame, specifically from a gender perspective in men and women specifically. She talks a lot about this, and she talks a lot about how she says it's telling ourselves a story. So she often will begin a frame with, the story I'm telling myself is, and this is why. And the reason she's doing that strategy, I wanted to unpack that a little bit, is because she's taking a moment to be present with what's happening to her. And she's encouraging us to do this as people, to take a moment to be present with what's happening, and then also understand what's within my control and what's not within my control. And also, what are the realities and truth versus the assumptions that I've kind of made up based on my own experiences, based on my own interpretations, my own assumptions, excuse me. So when we're in these situations where we're feeling pressure or anxiety or that heaviness of overwhelm, or sometimes for me, it's happened like I literally just feel paralyzed, like I can't get started on something. Tell me in the comments if you relate. I am feeling led that perhaps in the new year, I do a free series of some sort on our website, educatoraid.com, specifically on this topic, and giving people space to actually do something on their own that has to do with examining strategies for really overcoming some anxiety hurdles that you experience specifically in the workplace. Now, obviously, any strategies I try to share here, I hope that they're transferable in not only your personal life, but your professional life. And so the hope would be that you'd also see fruits in your personal world. But the main topic would be, how do we manage it in the workplace? Maybe you're a leader and many of the people that report to you are experiencing anxiety, even on a daily basis. But often, for example, if you're a chief financial officer, you're not trained to know intimately, how should I manage people's anxiety? That's okay. It's okay if you don't know. What wouldn't be okay is if you know something to be true and you have access to resources that help. So that's why we do what we do here. So be sure to hit subscribe. And if you haven't, go over to YouTube and subscribe on YouTube if you're listening to this on Apple, Audible, Google, Spotify, etc. Thank you for being here. So let's continue to get compassionately curious about this topic very briefly. I had an incredible expert, and we have him still live. He's the November featured voice, the Dean Hefta, author, consultant, speaker, coach. Be sure to check that out. I will also link that in here, but that is our November featured voice, Dean Hefta. Incredible guest here. And thank you, Dean, for your time. Okay, I want to read from this text. My first text, I'm going to give you 3 recommendations for where I recommend that you start based on the nature of not only unpacking your own distress signals, but also understanding the environment and climate of the world right now. There's a lot of transitioning happening, a lot of shifting happening, a lot of systems that are being dismantled and crumbling in very positive ways. But what happens with change is this. We often forget that change, especially rapid change and transformation, require management of it. Not every human is designed to be okay with just a quick change when it is something so deeply personal and cultural. Our culture is all very personal. Well, if people are used to a certain way of doing things, even if they didn't like it and complained about it, and they're part of an organization, there's going to be a transition time that change needs to be managed. People are going to wonder what happened to the old way of doing things. And if we're not being explicit in how we communicate change and then how we simultaneously manage it, this causes a lot of unnecessary corporate anxiety, literally, for an entire team or an entire department, or perhaps an entire company. This is when you often see a lot of people might jump ship from a job, or you see a lot of people leaving one particular place of work. So I think it's relevant that we talk about this, but I also want to give you tools to actually start with yourself. We often point the finger at the workplace and we think our leaders should be doing more, or our government should be doing more, until we don't just fixate on what other people are doing and we start within ourselves of like, why am I not at peace? Why am I experiencing anxiety? Then we're going to continue to try to point a finger instead of first saying, what can I do that's small in my own life to manage my own self when it comes to XYZ issue or topic, or wherever it is you feel and experience anxiety. So the first text recommendation is Subliminal. It's literally the color of my green screen, so it's a little hard to see. But it's called Subliminal: How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior by Leonard Mlodinow. I don't know that I'm saying his last name properly, so I apologize, Mr. Leonard. But I'm going to first reference something that I believe I brought up here before, but I'm going to say it again. I usually speak in general terms because I heard a speaker say this. It doesn't mean that it's fact, but he was giving a rough estimate of some recent research studies, and he talked about how we often have an overinflated view of our own self-awareness levels and really where we're at with things. In this text, I'm excited because this actually cites it. I've referenced that here before, and I want to be able to reference where that came from. It comes from this text. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't. It's only about 10 years old. The text itself, it came out in 2012. But I'm reading from page 19 here, just a brief excerpt for you all. What does this tell us? People have a basic desire to feel good about themselves, and we therefore have a tendency to be unconsciously biased in favor of traits similar to our own, even such seemingly meaningless traits as our names. So he's also referencing a table he has here about the most common groom surnames in the particular study, and then the bride maiden names, and how many Smiths also married a Smith, how many Johnsons married a Johnson, etc. So that is what he is referencing here. Scientists have even identified a discrete area of the brain called the dorsal striatum as the structure that mediates much of this bias. Research suggests that when it comes to understanding our feelings, we humans have an odd mix of low ability and high confidence. So that is where a lot of that referencing when it comes to self-awareness and just even being aware of how you identify, address, work through, and respond to the different emotions you experience on a daily basis. Most of us have an overinflated view of our ability to do that. I will tell you, I did not have a toolbox for that, literally. Even going into teaching and being a principal. And if you asked me at the time, I probably would have said, no, I think I'm pretty aware. But there's one of the things that the brain tries to do, I think, is to categorize. And so we have this way of filtering through, trying to label something as like, well, that's a good way of thinking, or that's a bad way of thinking. versus just saying it's a way of thinking. So I would encourage you first to try to start to notice your language around how you view yourself and how you're analyzing emotions in varying situations. I recommend his book because it does talk so much about that ability of the brain in the excerpt I just read to really unpack a situation authentically and step outside of what you're feeling, step outside of who you are to your core, and be able to set aside and go, what's really happening in this situation? And how can I confront it? How can I understand this better about myself? One of the problems I see most is that we don't create intentional time to do this with our teams, in our businesses, in our schools, in our churches, in our families. I am seeing it across the board, just listening to people over time, of people don't create space and time to actually digest. So just like you're supposed to sit a little bit and let food digest before you go swimming, before we go swimming out into the big world of a leadership position, or maybe you're a teacher, or maybe you're a principal, or maybe you're a CFO, or maybe you're a CEO, or maybe you're a pastor, whatever you are, how often do you just sit and listen? Listen to what happens in your mind. If we just paused and listen, how do we even have space to process or even think about processing emotions if we haven't created intentional space for reflection in our own lives? So that is why I begin there. With any type of anxiety is birthed out of the narrative that's on repeat in our brain. So this has to do with mood. It has to do with work ethic. It has to do with motivation. It has to do with how we resolve conflict. All of these pieces, how we experience anxiety, all of this goes back to, do we really understand what's underneath and how that's being infused into how I see a situation, how I react to it, how I respond to it? So I want to put that out there because it's a really big issue. It's a really big topic, but I am feeling led to put together some more specific things for you all. So just comment if that resonates and you're like, I need lots of tools for this. We have some already, but I want to maybe do a very targeted series of how to manage anxiety in the workplace. And I think that my hope is that this helps a lot of people. There's 2 other books I want to recommend very quickly that have to do with the same topic, maybe approaching it from a different way. If you're not into the more heady stuff, like I just broke down from the other text, this is a very recent book that just came out, and it's called Build the Life You Want by Arthur C. Brooks and Oprah Winfrey, Miss Oprah herself. And it is all about the art and science of getting happier. Very easy read, very tangible examples of how to make moves in your own life. Very real author, and also based in research. The final, very quick read, but also very much steeped in research from Dr. Masaru Emoto, is The Hidden Messages in Water. This is wild. This little book has really shifted my perspective on the power of words and the stories and narratives that become programmed and imprinted on our brain, so to speak, unless we bring them from the unconscious to the subconscious and then to the conscious and say, is that true? Or am I just telling myself that and I'm working myself into a cycle that doesn't need to happen right now? In his book, he talks a lot about the parallels for human emotions and that concept of polarity, and how those mindsets and those emotions, whether negative, positive, they really do impact everything we do, down to the main basis of this was a multi-year study that he conducted creating crystals from water. And so what he did was use different types of water. He had, obviously, all of this is detailed in here. He has very in-depth pictures that are beautiful that he took. But over time, as the team was researching this for years, they used phrases in different languages and in different phrases. So perhaps one of the waters might have been said to every day, multiple times a day, just shut up. And then the other water might have been told, you look beautiful today, I love you. The results that he found and the impact of the words that we tell ourselves and the words that we speak to others absolutely changed my perspective. It doesn't mean that I don't say things I wish I didn't say. So let me be clear. But I hope that you begin your journey to try to unpack this. I think it's very relevant, again, pardon the alert, I think it's very relevant for where we find ourselves in this current moment. Just want to hop on, check in with you all, and say, let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Let me know in the comments if that would be your jam to have some more resources on managing anxiety and specifically managing anxiety in the workplace. Take care.
Thank you so much for showing up for yourself, first and foremost, and for sitting down to have a conversation with us in this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I'm your host, Justine Gonzalez, and I encourage you to first and foremost check out our website, educatoraid.com, as well as any of the linked resources in the resource section of our show notes. And finally, be sure you hit subscribe on your preferred platform. For podcast preference, we stream on Audible, Amazon Prime, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review when you're over there on those platforms. And then you can also click to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is also in the resource section of our show notes. The reason why you would want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, number one, it is where we stream and premiere all of our featured voices interviews, which also include video, especially if you want to see, hear, interact with, and feel like you are sitting down a part of the conversation. I would always recommend that modality. However, it's also the place where we're going to continuously be releasing free high-level learning workshops for you and your team. So you're going to want to hit subscribe to the Educator Aid Incorporated official YouTube channel, as well as check out all of the resources that we put in the resource section of the show notes. Again, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. Let's continue to get compassionately curious together.